Welcome to the Business of Race podcast, where we examine issues of race and racism, how they impact businesses, and how organizations can effectively address those issues to create a healthier work environment for everyone. I'm your host, Regina Newkirk-Rucci, the Director of Equity for 90 Forward, a local racial equity and justice nonprofit located here in Jacksonville, Florida. And today I am joined in the conference room by Kolanda Douglas, who is the Director of Equity, Inclusion, and Diversity at Mayo Clinic at Rochester. All right. So, Kolanda, it's great to have you here. Thank you for taking the time away to talk with us. I'm really excited about it. But I always like to start the day with maybe just a little water cooler conversation. Just having a chance to sort of say, like, what's on your mind? What's going on?
So I think it's interesting that this is day 2 for me of being without my 2-year-old. And it's happened before, but every time he leaves and spends time with my parents, I always have this emotional limbo where, like, whew, this is a few days without my 2-year-old trying to help me do everything. But then now I'm sad because there's no sticky stuff on the table in the mornings. We're not doing our potty song in the mornings when we get dressed, but I got to sleep in. Like, I'm eating breakfast before work. So there are like pros and cons, but that emotional limbo that they don't tell you about in motherhood, that you're going to want them to leave, but want them to be home at the same.
Yep. It's quite the conundrum, right?
Yeah.
But you're like, oh, sleep is so good, but I miss that.
Yeah, it's so quiet.
Yeah, it's quiet, very quiet.
Yeah.
And you can actually do things when you want to.
And that's strange.
Yes. Don't get used to it.
Right. Right.
How long is he going to be gone?
We haven't discussed it. Like, they were here for the weekend, they were leaving, and he decided that they weren't leaving without him. And so, grandparents, they're like, get his bags, because he's not going to be crying. He's coming with us. So it wasn't a question like, what do you want us? It was, get his stuff.
Right.
He's coming with us. So we haven't even discussed, like, how long. It'll be sometime this weekend, but that means he'll be there the whole week.
The whole week.
So it's quiet in our house.
Well, I think I really appreciate the time that I had with my grandparents. Right. And so that's nice. I don't have any children, but I have nieces and nephews. Mm-hmm. And I think the experiences they get with grandma and grandpa are so great.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to be away from him, but my ex-sister-in-law informed me that it does get easier and it gets much better and you will enjoy it more. You got to get used to it first.
Yeah.
And then you're like, hey, you want to keep him another week?
Yeah.
Okay, I got a few things I need to do.
And I've been telling myself, enjoy it, because once he starts school, it won't be as easy. I have a 7-year-old who wants to go, but he has school. Mm-hmm. But he doesn't need me as much, so he, is doing his own thing. He feels like it's a break in the house.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's true. That's true. Well, it's funny. When my nieces were going to come stay with me, and my youngest niece at the time was 2. And I thought she was too young to stay with me, due to other girls. And so I said, well, I'll take the older 2, and, Danny can stay home. And so when my brother shows up, all 3 are there. And I was like, didn't we have this discussion? And he was like, oh, no, they come as a set. You get one, you get all 3. So, you may want to think also about the package, the full package deal.
Yeah. They can't live without each other. They need each other.
Right? You want them all together. You want to have the full experience.
That's true. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's move into the agenda topic today, which I think is really challenging for a lot of employers, and knowing what to do. And to the point that they often sort of freeze, like,
right.
And that is how to handle a racist employee or an employee who makes a racist remark. And I do want to really be clear that I don't think those are the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
But before we jump to an actual event,
mm-hmm.
I think a lot of pre-work is really important in this. So what are some things that employers can do to ensure a climate where that's less likely to happen?
So I think one of the things that we really have to do is, I say, employers should always acknowledge who's a part of their workforce. So we don't want to be ignorant of the fact that we have minorities here. We have underrepresented groups that work for our organization. So I think it starts with that, and then getting a census of what their needs are as employees. I think a lot of times maybe we jump into DEI strategies not really knowing that, oh, wow, we don't really have many Asians here. But, we're ready to do a full-blown Asian, event. We don't really have as much of a profile about who's in our workforce. So being mindful who is there and what their needs are, creating spaces for them to have as employees for their own safe spaces, and then something from an organization point of view that here are some opportunities that we also want to provide. So if that's employee resource groups where we're providing funding or we're providing some type of structure or some type of sponsorship or support, but then allowing these groups to have their own safe spaces where they don't have to have, their bosses involved. They can, gather around at lunchtime. They can create events, and then the workforce knows that these events are happening. And so we're going to give our employees the opportunity to attend these events that they created for themselves.
Well, and I think employee resource groups can also be a great way of getting some of that information from those employees, right?
Yeah.
So I think sometimes we want to assume that we know what's happening with the group as opposed to what's actually happening and what the real need is.
Right.
And so having those groups, those ERGs or those BRGs really be responsible for not only creating safe spaces for those employees, but also communicating to the higher ups, hey, this is what's happening.
Yep.
Right, because we're big data nerds around here. That's a good source for data.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you've created those groups, and you sort of set those structures in place, then what does the organization do? So, all right, so I've got, there is a Black employees resource group over here, and I've got an LGBTQ plus resource group over here, and I've got an immigrant or a non-native English speaking group over here, right? I've got all of these different employee resource groups. And I've given them money and they're holding events. Is that all I need to do? Am I good?
No, we need to create a reputation of equity, inclusion, and diversity. And so I'll go back to why that's my title. So our organization says diversity is a no-brainer. As many times or as, from according to where you recruit from or where the region you live in, diversity is going to be a no-brainer. So that's already easily achievable. So what we want to focus on is creating equity and inclusion. So that's why we have our words changed around. So we want to create a reputation in the workforce or at this organization, one of equity and inclusion. So it's not enough to just create these spaces, but we want this language to be embedded in all of our processes and all of our statements. Everything needs to be seen through the lens of equity and inclusion, not just HR processes. But when we decide that we want to make a commitment to a certain organization or community, how we consider how this may impact the people inside of our workforce. There are a lot of times where organizations may want to, stand up for a specific cause. How we consider how this may impact some of the people in our workforce, first. So not just equity and inclusion from HR standpoint, but from when we're doing public facing things, when we're having specific events, when we're holding our annual conferences, are we being mindful about the times of the year that we're holding these conferences so that we can make sure that we're not going to be offensive to someone inside of our workforce? So I think the next step is to make sure that everything in our organization screams equity. It's done from an inclusive point of view, not just our HR processes.
Well, and I think that sometimes people really struggle with equity and inclusion.
Yeah.
And for the moment, I'm going to put them together.
Okay.
But then I'm going to separate them out. I'm a good person. I believe in the value of all people. I don't have a racist bone in my body. And I'm not trying to do anything that would harm anybody. And I think a lot of people feel like if I have that posture, if that's my belief, that the equity and inclusion will come, or it's not my fault that that's not happening.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there has to be some intention
Mm-hmm.
with that. But a lot of people struggle with what that is. Like, what do I look for? Like, I don't know. I didn't know. So many times when there's been an issue, there was well, I didn't know.
Yeah.
Right? And you can't fault people. Well, you can sometimes, but you don't know everything.
Right.
Right? So how do you go about creating an equitable and inclusive environment? Maybe if you're just talking about, managing your staff team, when you don't have the full range of views, you've got great intentions, but you don't necessarily know the perspectives. I don't know what time of year things happen or what happens. So how do you go about creating that?
So I'm going to say first, from like a procedure point of view, we want to make sure that everyone in the organization is aware that there's a such thing called a diversity calendar. We use like equity newsletters to make sure everyone is informed about the different heritage months that may be occurring within the next, months or so. And even like, here are some ideas of how you can celebrate or collaborate with some of our, employee resource groups. But I think the other thing is to provide some transparency about some of the things that may be happening within the organization. So one of the things that we have at my organization, we call it a Get Real platform, where employees are able to go on and write about experiences that they're having, and our research center logs it. So then if I want to go specifically look and see about experiences that Native American employees are having at Mayo, then I can go and look at the Get Real platform and search by that. But I think we have to be more transparent that these things are happening, just as we're just as transparent about sexual harassment in our organizations. Mm-hmm. Most organizations produce like an annual report about cases that have occurred, or, hey, we're doing better about this. I think we could do the same thing with equity and inclusion. If we are seeing that compliance is receiving like an increased number of reports related to racism and discrimination, I think we ought to be transparent about that, especially for people who feel like it's not happening in my neck of the woods. Mm-hmm. It can't possibly be happening. Not here. Being more transparent that their people are having experiences, and not requiring the people to have to tell their stories, but mm-hmm. just having systems or some type of platform in place where people can be honest about some of the things that are happening, and then the organization doesn't find it's scary or like icky to share this with their employees, but we're sharing it from a point of view like, we need to correct this. Like we're finding some things in our house that we don't really like, and we want to make everybody aware about it, because these are the things that we're going to be working on.
And I think in order to do that effectively, you also have to have a culture of trust.
Yes.
Right? Because if I don't know what you're going to do with my statement, if I don't know that that's not going to come back on me, I'm not going to share those experiences. But that also means I'm less likely to stay there, right? So you've got to have that trusting environment where people can openly and honestly share. It's not put back on them, but like, you must have done something, right? Yeah. Or that wouldn't happen here, or dismissed.
Right.
Or written off. I was talking with one organization where an employee who is Jewish raised the fact that we're doing all this to celebrate Christmas, but there's no recognition of Hanukkah. Mm. And the response was basically, well, you're the only one that has a problem with it, right?
Oh, wow.
Well, yes, because she's the only person who's Jewish. But that's not going to make her more likely to come and tell you anything else, right? So these kinds of things, I think, all go into really looking at, do employees trust you enough to be honest with you? Because if you don't have that first, you're not going to get, the real deal platform.
Yeah. And I think the way that we resolve that is that when we say we're going to do something, we're doing this for this reason, we actually do it. And then we provide evidence that it's been done. Mm-hmm. So, after the murder of George Floyd, there was an increase of organizations who made commitments to their Black employees about doing certain things. I wonder how many have been transparent about what they've done.
Right.
You know, you made this huge publicity. I don't want to call it a stunt, but that may be what it seems to be in the end if there has not been anything actually done for the people that you promised something would be done for. And I think we have to be more transparent that we want to do this and then provide evidence, even if it's slow evidence, even if it's slow progress, that there has been some progress, you know, as a result of the statement that we said we were going to do.
Right. And I think you also, like, the transparency will come or can come, but you also really have to be committed to it.
Yes.
Right. Because let's be honest, there were quite a few organizations who did it because it was the right thing to do.
It was the right thing to do.
It was everybody else is
Yes.
doing it. This horrible, we're responding to this moment, but nothing about the organization had changed or the commitment.
Right.
Right. And so, and employees see through that. I'm like, you have the statement up here, but it's still exactly the same thing.
Nothing has
Right.
changed.
Nothing has changed. And that's not going to get you a diverse employee base that really feels like they belong and is going to bring their best selves to work.
Yep.
Okay. So now we sort of put equity and inclusion together.
Okay.
Now let's separate them.
Okay.
Because I actually think equity is harder.
Yes.
Right. So let's talk about inclusion.
Okay.
All right. So what are some of the things that as an employer need to be top of mind as I think about creating an inclusive environment? Because, you know, there's so many identities. There's so many things that sometimes it can feel overwhelming.
Yeah.
Right. You know, I'm like, I remember the good old days when it was just race and gender, right? But there's so many other things that you have to think about, right? You have to think about physical abilities. You have to think about gender identity and sexual orientation. You have to think about religion. You have to think about backgrounds and economic, socioeconomic histories and backgrounds. All kinds of pieces in this inclusion bucket. How do you do that effectively? Not get overwhelmed by it, but do it effectively so that regardless of what my identity is, I still can feel included in this organization.
I think one of the first things is to recognize that different identities need different things. So I don't think we can say, okay, we're going to create these different employee resource group and everybody's going to have this, this, and this, because each group needs something different. Mm-hmm. I also think you have to allow the employees to tell you what they need. Now, we can create process around when these requests may come up, but I would much rather the employees to say, hey, there's a need for a Indian employee resource group. And then really tell us more about that. And then we find out that, oh, wow, this particular site has more Indian American employees than we thought we had. Now, we may not have this at another site. Mm-hmm. But this site specifically has an increased number, and then maybe even with our region or where the city that we're located, we can see that maybe there aren't that many even in the city that's surrounding us. So I think we have to be mindful that each group needs something different, and then maybe also based on your specific employee workforce, not trying to do one size fits all, that we should have employee resource group for every race or for military, for disability, because what if you don't have any military employees? Mm-hmm. You know, just so that it doesn't get overwhelming, but so that it's still tailor-made to what your organization needs.
Well, see, now this gets into the equity space, right? Yeah. Because I'm going to tell you that sounds like it could be unequal. Yeah. And it feels safer to me as an employer if I give everybody the same thing. Right? Because then it's not a discrimination thing. It's not you're favoring this group over this group, right? And I don't want to be perceived that way. How can I still be equitable in giving people what they need, right? And hearing that from them, but not be perceived as being favoring this group or showing a preference toward XYZ group. How do I balance being equitable based on what the needs are, but still addressing this. We're trying to create we're here for everybody in an equal fashion.
So this is where I would put on my HR side of my hat. So what we have done is we have employee resource groups. We have a process for if employees feel like there is a need for an additional resource group. But our process is, okay, so tell me how this resource and this group that you're proposing is different than what may already exist, and how or is there an opportunity for what you're proposing to be collaborative with something that already exists, so that we're not adding specifically something new, but maybe there's another dimension of diversity in this particular group where we need to dig a little deeper. So I'll say, like, for example, maybe you have an African descendant group, and then we find out that we actually have a lot of employees from Pan-Africa. Is there an opportunity for us to collaborate? And then the group, actually, there's a benefit if it becomes larger, but now we get a more specific look into a specific dimension of diversity in this area, this intersection that we missed, but you can help inform us more about. So I think in those instances, our processes have to be tight enough where it doesn't overwhelm us, but still a little like loose enough where there is some freedom to do something different, maybe for this group. But then maybe there's another group where we see like, okay, well, we did have an Asian merge, but we really have an overwhelming number of Chinese employees. And so maybe for this, so that this group has an opportunity where their focus isn't overtaken by the Asian merge, because maybe people who identify as just Asian isn't as large of a population as the Chinese employees who really need our attention. Again, I'll go back to our processes. If there is an opportunity where this dimension of diversity may take away from the Asian, and that you need a specific group for the Chinese merge, but then we still have an expectation that, there's some collaboration. So I think in those instances, our processes, we have to have something in place where we're not being overwhelmed as an organization. But again, so you feel like there is some room to create something different.
No, I think that's spot on. And one thing that you kept talking about is processes. And I think I would put with that transparency in the processes.
Yes.
Because that's also going to add to, this isn't favoritism. This is giving people what they need.
Yeah. And just recognizing that we all have different needs. And as an organization, from the organization standpoint, I don't know what your community may need. It may seem obvious that everybody should just have their own thing, or that, why can't you all just collaborate? But then I think we're getting into the weeds of the intersections of specific communities who know what they need.
Right.
So,
well, and, like I used to tell the students in my classroom, it's about what the goal is, right? It's like the goal is to see the board. Everybody in the room doesn't need glasses. There's some of us who do, and some of us who need thicker glasses than others. But the goal is to see the board. Now, at the end of it, yes, maybe there are a fourth of us that have glasses, but can we all see the board? And I think that's another thing, right? It's not what we're giving, it's can we all successfully reach this end? And that's what we're focused on. And that's what creates the equity.
And maybe we need to do better about defining it and not using equity and inclusion so interchangeably as if they're synonyms, but being clear about, this is what our organization means when we say inclusive. This is what we mean when we say equity. Or even diversity.
Yeah, and I think that's another thing too, right? You, again, sort of this transparency, definitions help with that. Yeah. And that should be really public. What does that mean to your organization? Right. And being very clear about that. Right. So that people know right from the get-go. All right. So you've done all this pre-work to create these inclusive and equitable spaces that are automatically going to be diverse, right? Again, not hard to do, especially if you've got all these other things. And then you have an employee who, and let's take maybe the more egregious issue first. You have an employee who is consistently engaging in either racist behavior or making racist statements. And I'm going to, in 2023, I'm going to take that both that's happening at work and maybe on social media in a very public space that's even associated with work. For this one, how should an employer handle that issue? Because a lot of people feel like, it's not like there isn't a work thing that was done. And yeah, I've talked to them about not saying these things, but he didn't even understand what's the problem with what's being said. But employees are really upset, and it's also saying something when you're allowing somebody to stay with uncorrected behavior, right? So how do you handle something that is, number one, can be perception based, right? There have been several times where I felt like something was racist, but a colleague did not. Right. Or something that is social media where, yes, I'm representing BYC company, but I'm at home and on my own time.
So I think the problem has been that when you're in this space, employers have been trying to evaluate the person's intent. And I think we need to move from that and judge or evaluate what happened based on the impact that it made. So I'm not saying that because I thought that this was racist and maybe a colleague did not. That does, indicate impact if I thought it was racist. But if it's happening consistently, now we have a pattern of behavior. And I don't think that it has to only be proven in the workplace. If we could see it online as well, this person has a pattern of behavior of making racist comments. And so moving from looking at intent, they didn't understand it, they didn't know what they meant, we would just want to give them some education. But look at the impact that continued behavior has on anybody or anything, not just because it was said to a person who maybe have been directly impacted by what was said. And I think sometimes that goes into it. Well, maybe if it was said to somebody who didn't belong to this community, it would be okay. But we want to look at the impact of the statement, period. We're not looking at the intent. We want to look at the impact of the statement, what was said, and then especially if it was egregious enough to be continued behavior, we definitely want to do something about it. But I think you're right. This is the first time they said it. It was the first time somebody caught it on social media. Those are the moments where we have an opportunity to do something about it. But some employers shy away from it because it's like, at this point, I don't really know the intent behind what they said. But we have to get to a point where we call a thing a thing. Right. Is it?
Well, and understand, and I think this is also a piece that employers often miss, right? Well, I'm going to wait because I don't know the intent.
Yeah.
But for the people who were impacted, but you weren't really serious when you said you were committed to equity, inclusion, and diversity, right? So understand that a non-move is still a move.
It is.
Right? And so you're still making a statement whether you open your mouth or not, and you may be speaking to populations and groups that you weren't intending to speak to in an attempt to make sure you fully understand, make sure that you're giving somebody a fair shot, and not being immediately responsive. And I think that's the other thing, right? People jump to, you have to just immediately go and fire somebody.
Yeah.
And I don't think that in most cases that's true. Now there's some, you know what, we don't have any debate.
Yeah.
This is, you gotta go.
Yeah.
Right? But that's not going to be most of these types of cases. But immediate action isn't firing somebody, but immediate action is still doing something initially.
Right.
And what are some of the things that employers should do immediately when those kinds of things happen?
So if it's a person who's committing it, they need to, I think, be removed. If that's from the floor, from their desk, we need to have an immediate conversation to address the behavior. Because what happens if in our delayed response, they don't really take that there was some seriousness to what they said or what they did. But if we respond immediately, then that lets them know that, okay, something is wrong here. I messed up. Mm-hmm. So we can remove them from their duty to have an immediate conversation. And I think ultimately we can decide I think maybe organizations should create some type of guideline. So if it was a statement or a comment made, then maybe we'll handle it this way. But if it was something written, or if it was antagonizing behavior, because I think sometimes we get caught up on like, oh, it was a common joke. It was something that everybody always says, but I think they should be looked at differently if it was a comment or if it was antagonizing behavior. I don't care if you didn't say anything, but you're always pulling my hair. That's antagonizing behavior, and it should be dealt with immediately. And I think the consequences really depend on, like, if it's egregious enough to, like, you're actually touching, a person, or if it's like a pattern of behavior. I think we can give some grace if this is a first-time offense. But if we're talking to the department and we find that this is not the first time that this has happened, that this is just the first documented time, but I think that needs to be taken into consideration. So corrective action all the way up to suspension, all the way to termination.
Right. And also, as you said, like, we're talking to the department, because don't assume that you know everything. And so investigation is also a big part of this, because is this a one-time offense and you just made a joke in poor taste, really poor taste? Or is this something that you're doing on a regular basis, and this is the first time I'm hearing about it, right? Again, that's really important, but an investigation, which also shows that it's important and it's immediate, right? And so we're getting to the bottom of this, because this is not acceptable behavior in our organization. All right, so that's more on the employer side. But if I'm an employee, right, so I've got this nice new job, and I am working in a department where maybe I'm the only one, or I'm one of the only ones of whatever marginalized group that is. And an offensive statement is made to me. So if somebody makes a racist comment, somebody makes a sexist comment, a homophobic comment, what have you. How should I handle that? Because I don't want to rock the boat, right? A lot of people don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to give the message that in any way this is acceptable, but I also don't want to be perceived as the problem, the angry Black women, or all of these other things that can go with that. And so lots of times, especially if that's made by somebody maybe who's been there for a long time, somebody who is at a higher ranking or position than you, it can be really daunting on how to handle it. Because, like I said, I don't want to let it go, because I don't want that to continue. But at the same time, I don't want to jeopardize this great position and this great promotion and say something that then you hold against me, and somehow, I'm in a different job next year. So how should employees handle that?
So I always like to tell employees, like, we need you as much as you need us. There's a reason why we put this job ad out. It was because it was a position that needed to be filled. So it's not that we're doing you a favor and we're giving you a check. We also need you to come to work. And so I think I try to shift employees to think about, this is supposed to be a win-win relationship. And at any time that the relationship does not suit me, I need to let somebody know. And I understand people aren't always comfortable going through the process that their organizations have spelled out, because they feel like, fear of, being found out or something. It may happen in retaliation. But organizations don't know until they know. And somebody has to be the brave one. Someone has to say something to stop the behavior. And the reason why I'm passionate about it is a few years ago, before I was with my current employer, I had to file a complaint. And I had tried the organization's processes and was not seeing any benefit. But it wasn't until it was bothering my emotional and mental health. And I think we have to learn as employees to see ourselves as valuable as much as this opportunity was. And if at any point I'm losing me, or I am physically suffering as a result of what's happening, somebody needs to know what's going on.
Right.
Because I don't want people to suffer in silence. So even if the organization, like, you've never really seen anybody be successful with this process, I always encourage employees to, if you want to start out, if you're comfortable going to HR, if your organization has a compliance process, If not, there are external resources where you don't have to say a word. They will come in and go to the organization on your behalf about what your complaint is. But at some point, we have to be comfortable. We can't, I don't want us to fear retaliation more. I think it should be scarier that I may be at a place that continues to treat me poorly and that as a result, I will physically suffer than to live in fear of the retaliation that may come.
And I think also being really upfront about that, if you were talking with somebody in-house, right? I am telling you this because it's significant. It's having a physical and mental effect on me. And it does not seem to stand in alignment with the organizational values. But I'm also very concerned, and I've been hesitant about telling you about this because this is a wonderful opportunity, and I don't want to have any kind of retaliatory action happen so that I'm in this job. But that also puts the employer on alert that, okay, because that also means there's something there that indicates that retaliation might happen.
Right.
And so that gives your employer an opportunity to really make sure that that's handled correctly and that that does not happen to you as well.
Right.
So I think some transparency about that is also beneficial.
Yeah. And I think, too, in addition to that transparency, when employers know that you know what your rights are, I feel like they handle you a lot differently. So even if it's, shaking in your boots, just as scared as you are, being mindful about what your rights are, what their policy says for things like this, where you can remind them that your policy says that this, and this is not tolerated. So like at Mayo, one of our first things is respect. So anything that falls under disrespect has an opportunity to be challenged because this is what you said, that this was your first core truth for your organization. And I think when employees go into these spaces armed with knowledge and with the truth of what the organization says, it's difficult to argue with somebody who would tell us word for word, what our policy says about this process or how this behavior is handled.
And so that, for me, is also being knowledgeable.
Yeah.
Right? It's really amazing to me. It's like, you signed an employee handbook receipt and you didn't read it.
Yeah.
You ought to know what you're committing to.
Yeah.
Right? But for situations like this, you also ought to know what the organization committed to.
Right.
So that you can walk into a meeting being very knowledgeable. This is what you stated here. This is what you stated here. Google's also your best friend. Right? Everything's online. What does the law require as it relates to this? What state are you in? What does the state then provide for you in that? So there are a lot of resources. And yes, when you come into a meeting like you've done your homework, it is a very different meeting.
Yes, it is.
So that's really, really great. Okay, so as we wrap this up, right, we've put a lot of things on the table. If you were thinking about one big takeaway from our discussion today, what would that be? What would you say? Like, if you were just going to focus on one thing, if you only heard one thing, make sure you heard this.
I'm going to talk to employees. I think a lot of organizations are on alert about DEI initiatives, and, we are doing our great work these days as a result of some things that have happened in society to inform people. So everybody is on alert about equity, inclusion, and diversity within their organization. This is the time to address certain things. This is the time to bring things to the table. And I even like your comment about signing employee handbooks and not being mindful. You need to be mindful if your organization has a process for things like this, because typically organizations have processes for discrimination, harassment, but don't say anything about racism. And then that's a gap. So if you do experience it in your workplace, then no wonder nobody feels any resolve, because there's not a process in place. So I think I want the employees to walk away from this and be informed. Go look at those policies and procedures and challenge them on the things that they have said publicly and internally, what they stand on. And if there are any gaps in the process, because, we know our coworkers who are suffering certain things and certain issues, but if there are any gaps in the process, it will stall any progress that we're hoping to see, because that's an unaddressed area here at this organization.
All right. So I'm going to take that and then flip it to employers.
Okay.
Right. And that being, make sure you have processes in place to get that critical feedback from employees. Do not assume that, nothing is rotten in the state of Denmark. How do you know? And are employees capable of telling you the truth without fear? And you have to create those processes because maybe that isn't covered in your handbook. But I will also tell you that if you have the right processes in place, if you've got an employee base that trusts you, employees will raise that to your attention. Yeah. There really has to be something to address this. This is happening repeatedly with XYZ person, and there's nothing here. I don't know what to do, right? So really examining the ways that you are getting data from your employees and ways to be responsive to it. Because if you get all the information, you know it, and you don't do anything about it, truthfully, that's worse than you having it in the first place.
That's right.
Right? So really thinking through what are the different avenues that people can tell me things without consequence, and what are the ways that I can respond that are really going to make a difference in creating a more equitable and inclusive corporate environment where everyone feels like they belong.
Right.
All right. Well, Kolanda, this has been amazing. I love it. It's been wonderful having you here in the conference room. You've been a gem of wisdom.
Oh.
So thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Well, we'll definitely have you back because there's lots more to talk about.
Yeah, there is.
But I'm also going to hope that you really take the rest of this week and do some fun things for yourself while you are toddler free.
Yeah.
Right? Because he will be back.
He will.
With full energy.
Yeah. And I'll have to deprogram him.
Uh-huh. Yep. Oh, yeah, because he's been with the grandparents, and that's a whole different.
Yeah.
It's really amazing to me how much my parents changed when they had grandchildren. I'm like, who are you?
Yeah. They're the whole new set of rules.
Yeah. And you're gonna have to plan some time for deprogramming. So get your rest up for that now.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us here today, and thank you for joining us for this podcast. Please click that like button. We like to be liked, and be sure to subscribe so you'll be notified every time that there is new content. And we've got a lot of content to talk about in this subject. So thank you so much for joining us this week in the conference room, and we'll see you next week. Take care.